BBC Surrey with Joe Talbot.
22 minutes to 8 now, and in 1991, Shaun Attwood from Guildford seemed to have it all, a promising career as a stockbroker and the possibility of hitting the big time in the US, but the dream came crashing down when he was sentenced to 9.5 years for drug dealing and ended up in one of America's most notorious jails. He's just published his first book, Hard Time, a Brit in America's toughest jail. He'll be in Guildford later on today for a book signing, and he joins me in the studio along with his mum, Barbara. So good morning, Shaun. Good morning, Mum.
Good morning, Joe.
Thanks very much for coming in and seeing us. Let's talk briefly about how good things were. First of all, we won't dwell on that too long, but how good things were before things went bad. It sounds like you were living a dream.
Well, from my teenage years, I started following the stock market, and I made $1 million in the stock market. I was a young person.
Wow.
In America, and the money went to my head, and I started throwing rave parties with it. Had people selling ecstasy, so I knowingly broke the law, take full responsibility. SWAT team smashes my door down. I end up in the jail. It's got the highest rate of death in America.
When when they kicked the door down, where were you, in bed?
I was actually on the computer closing out an options trade when they started knocking on the door. I ran to the bedroom to get my girlfriend. We came running back and we were about to open the door and boom, it just leaps off its hinges and they all come running in. Get on the ground now, hands above your heads, don't move. And then they just crush you basically and handcuff you.
And at that moment, what did you think was going? Did you know why they were there? Did you know what was going to happen next? Did you know you're going to end up in this penitentiary?
Yes, the detective said I was a big name from the rave scene, so I knew all the crimes I'd committed over the years had invited them into my door. So, like I said earlier, I take full responsibility.
And was it kind of a call that you were expecting, or did you think, they'll never get me?
Well, you know what, we did used to joke about being above the law. I'd got away with breaking the law for so long, I did actually think I was above the law. But sooner or later, like I tell the local schools when I do my talk, if you're going to break the law, it will eventually catch up with you, so I had to pay the price at some point.
Okay, so let's talk about what happened next. You went in front of a sheriff, is that right?
Sheriff Joe Arpaio, he's a famous sheriff in America. He's the guy who runs the jail.
Right, and he doesn't take any prisoners, but he does.
Yeah, he feeds the prisoners mouldy bread and green bologna for breakfast, a mystery meat slop in the evening that has dead rats in it. The cockroaches were infesting the cells, and not only gang members like the Aryan Brotherhood were murdering the prisoners, even the guards were murdering the prisoners. And guards that murdered the prisoners and were found responsible for doing that in the federal court system, the Sheriff Joe Arpaio, actually promoted them and gave them pay rises.
Really?
Yes.
So, what his position as a sheriff? You were explaining to me during the record. He's elected. He's not put in the job. He's elected by the people of Arizona.
Yeah, he has a massive support base in Arizona, but he also has massive detractors. Amnesty International, all these human rights organisations are investigating him because of the flagrant human rights violations over the years at the jail.
Tell me about your first night in his jail.
Your first night, basically, you can't sleep, you're terrified, your heart's just beating against the surface at night and you can feel it and it's keeping you awake. Everything you think about in your everyday life, who's texting me, what am I going to do next, all that kind of stuff, it's out the window, it's just raw survival. There's so much violence in there. I had to get used to the sounds of people's heads getting bashed against toilets, bodies getting thrown around, even people getting carried out on stretchers who looked like they were dead.
Did you have to share cells? Did you get your own cell? What was the...
Yes, the cells were originally designed for one man, but the sheriff had put 3 bunks in there, so you got 3 guys living in a space for one person. The toilet's right next to the bunks, so there's no privacy. You got these guys you're living with right next to the toilet, and then you've got all the guys in the day room on the other side of the toilet as well.
And what was the reception you got from them? Because you're not a gang member and you're not a hardened criminal, right. So how did they view you? Did they see you as sort of easy fodder, or did they leave you alone?
Well, I was a curiosity to them because I was like this quirky English guy, and over time, as I got to know them, they'd ask me stuff about England, if I knew the Spice Girls, if I knew the Queen, I'd play along with it.
So is that like being a funny kid at school to survive? Is that
exactly? Yes, because I'm not a big tough guy, so I had to use my people skills basically.
Yeah, and even if you were a big tough guy, it wouldn't really help you, would you, in a place like that?
No, the gangs go in people in cells in packs. Under every head of the race are guys called torpedoes, and they'll go in and smash someone for the head of the race, no questions asked. They're constantly holding kangaroo courts in there, people are constantly getting smashed.
Barbara, you sat here gulping your coffee down, listening to all this. You probably heard it all before. Is it any less horrific for you every time you hear it, imagining him?
No. I sometimes think it's somebody else. I'm listening to somebody else, it's somebody else's story, because it does seem unreal, because we were just an ordinary family.
Shaun says, he, in a way, and he preaches in schools to children saying if you break the law, eventually it will catch up with you. And in a way, he may have seen it coming. Did you see it coming? Did you know he was a big deal on the rave scene?
No. We'd been to visit him in America every year, in his lovely house and swimming pool, and no, but we never imagined anything like this.
So the fact that he was even involved in that to begin with.
Well, I knew he was promoting raves. He did tell me he was promoting raves, but I suppose me and my husband were naive, really, not to realise the link with ecstasy.
So when he ended up in jail, I mean, that prospect must have been pretty awful, but obviously you didn't know what this jail was or what it was like or who this sheriff was until he got in there.
Well, he started writing letters home, and that's how his blog came about, really, because he wanted to highlight the conditions in the prison. So he started, his dad had read the Baghdad Blogger by Salem Pax. He wrote about the bombs raining down on Iraq. And he said, well, why don't you write a blog? But there's no computers in the American prisons. So Shaun scribbled this blog down with a little golf pencil and sent it to us. His aunt smuggled it out of the prison, actually, because it was highlighting the conditions. Mm-hmm. And she smuggled it out of the prison in legal papers, and we typed it up on the internet and created John's Jail Journal, which is...
It went on to attract international media attention to the conditions.
Yes.
That's how my writing started, was to expose what was going on.
Was that a sensible thing to do? You're in Sheriff Joe's prison and it's horrific and you've smuggled something out on a bit of paper. Did you think, this could actually come back to haunt me?
Yeah, my mum didn't want me to do it at first because she'd seen the news about the guards murdering the prisoners. But it was, there was so many people getting killed in there and suicides and all that stuff. I just felt that it was something that the public need to know about. A guard said to me, the world has no idea what's really going on in here, so I decided that was about to change.
Did they find out while you were still in there that you were doing this?
No, it was kept anonymous, and when I was sentenced and got moved to the prison system, that's when The Guardian ran excerpts, the BBC picked up on it, just snowballed from there.
And have you won't have heard from Sheriff Joe since your release, but he's obviously aware that you of what's happened now, is he?
Well, he did acknowledge that he's reading my book.
He did?
Yes, he put it on his Twitter page.
Right.
Because I sent him a signed copy, but he never said anything after he'd read it.
Okay.
So.
What about the sort of effect it had on you, Barbara, all of this? When it came to light, not only was he promoting raves and he was selling illegal substances, not only did he have his door kicked down and lose his fortune, not only did he end up in America's most notorious jail and then decide to try and change the conditions and thereby writing about it. Well, I mean, what effect did it have on you?
Well, I had a nervous breakdown, but when I first found out that Shaun was in prison, and when we got that first phone call, I had my daughter and my husband sworn to secrecy. I was very ashamed, very embarrassed. I was a tutor at a college. I thought I'd lose my job. I thought everyone would turn against me. People would write drug dealers on the wall, so I didn't want anyone to know. But I broke down at college. Everyone knew there was something wrong, and eventually I told everyone, and everyone was very supportive because they knew the family and they knew Shaun growing up, and everyone was wonderful. But it was quite an experience. I mean, it's an experience I could have done without. But, I mean...
Were you cross with him?
I was, but I felt so sorry for him being in those conditions. I mean, Shaun committed a crime. His book isn't a whinge about the conditions. He admits that he committed a crime and he deserved to be punished, but nobody deserves the inhuman conditions in Ohio's prisons. But when we went to visit him the first time, he looked like a Belsen, a concentration camp inmate. He was so thin. And
does what happens in this jail, do you think, go against this sort of what America stands for?